in which our lovers begin to learn the consequences of their actions. Chapter 24. The night Levine spent on the haystack was not wasted on him. The farming he had been engaged in he now came to loathe, and it lost all interest for him. Despite excellent crops, there had never been, or at least it seemed to him that there had never been, so many failures and so much animosity between him and the Mujiks as that year. And the cause of the failures and the animosity was now clear to him. The delight he had experienced in the work itself, the closeness with the Mujiks that had come from it, the envy of them and of their life that he had experienced, the wish to go over to that life, which that night had no longer been a dream for him but an intention, the fulfillment of which he had been thinking over in detail. All this had so changed his view of farming that he could no longer find any of his former interest in it, and could not help seeing his own unpleasant attitude towards his workers, which was at the bottom of the whole thing. The herds of improved cows, the same as Pava, the earth all plowed and fertilized, the 9 deeply plowed under dung, the seed drills, and so on, all that would have been wonderful if it had been done by him alone, or with friends, people sympathetic to him. But he now saw clearly his work on the book about agriculture, in which the fundamental element had to be the worker, had helped him greatly in this. He saw clearly now that the farming he was engaged in was merely a cruel and persistent struggle between him and his workers, in which on the one side, his own, there was a constant, intense striving to remake everything after the best considered fashion, and on the other there was a natural order of things, and in this struggle he saw that, with the greatest straining of forces on his part, and with no effort or even intention on the other, all that was achieved was that the farming did not go in any direction, and that beautiful machines, beautiful cattle, and soil were ruined for nothing. And above all, not only was the energy directed towards it completely wasted, but he could not help feeling, now that the meaning of his work had been laid bare for him, that the goal of his energy was a most unworthy one. What, essentially, did the struggle consist in? He stood for every penny he had, and could not do otherwise, because as soon as he slackened his energy, he would not have enough money to pay the workers, and they stood only for working quietly and pleasantly, that is, as they were accustomed to do. It was in his interest that each worker should do as much as possible, that he should keep his wits about him at the same time, that he should try not to break the winnowing machine, the horse rake, the thresher, that he should try to think about whatever he was doing. The worker, however, wanted to work as pleasantly as possible, with rests, and above all, carelessly, obliviously, thoughtlessly. That summer Levine saw it at every step. He sent people to mow clover for hay, choosing the worst acres, overgrown with grass and wormwood, unfit for seed. They went and mowed down his best seeding acres, justifying themselves by shifting it on to the steward and comforting him with the excellence of the hay. But he knew the reason was that those acres were easier to mow. He sent out the haymaker. It broke down in the first row, because the Mujik got bored sitting on the box under the turning blades, and they told him, "Never fear, sir. The women will do it in a trice." The plows were no good because it did not occur to the worker to lower the raised shear, and resorting to force, he wore out the horses and ruined the soil, and they asked him not to worry. Horses were led into the wheat fields because not one worker wanted to be night watchman, and despite orders to the contrary, the workers took turns looking after the horses at night, and some Vanka, after working all day, would fall asleep and then confess a sin, saying, "Do as you like, sir." The 3 best calves died from overfeeding, having been led out into a regrown clover field without being watered, and in no way would they believe that they became bloated by the clover, but told him in consolation how a neighbor had lost 112 head in 3 days. All this was done not because anyone wished evil to Levin or his farming. On the contrary, he knew he was loved and considered a simple master, which was the highest praise. It was done only because of the wish to work merrily and carelessly, and his interests were not only foreign and incomprehensible to them, but fatally opposed to their own most just interests. For a long time Levin had felt displeased with his attitude towards farming. He had seen that his boat was leaking, but he could not find and did not look for the leak, perhaps deceiving himself on purpose. But now he could no longer deceive himself. The farming he had been engaged in not only ceased to interest him, but disgusted him, and he could no longer be occupied with it. To that was added the presence some 20 miles away of Kitty Sherbatsky, whom he wanted to see and could not. Darya Alexandrovna Oblonsky, when he had visited her, had invited him to come in order to renew his proposal to her sister, who, as she let him feel, would now accept him. Levin himself, when he saw Kitty Sherbatsky, realized that he had never ceased to love her, but he could not go to the Oblonskys knowing that she was there. The fact that he had proposed and she had refused him put an insuperable obstacle between them. "I can't ask her to be my wife only because she couldn't be the wife of the one she wanted," he said to himself. The thought of it turned him cold and hostile towards her. I'd be unable to speak to her without a feeling of reproach, to look at her without anger, and she'll hate me still more, as she ought to. And then, too, how can I go to them now, after what Darya Alexandrovna told me? How can I not show that I know what she told me? And I'll come with magnanimity, to forgive, to show mercy to her, me in the role of a man forgiving her and deigning to offer her his love. Why did Darya Alexandrovna say that? I might have seen her accidentally, and then everything would have happened by itself, but now it's impossible. Impossible. Darya Alexandrovna sent him a note, asking him for a side saddle for Kitty. "I've been told you have a side saddle," she wrote to him. "I hope you'll bring it yourself." That he simply could not bear. How could an intelligent, delicate woman so humiliate her sister? He wrote 10 notes, tore them all up, and sent the saddle without any reply. To write that he would come was impossible, because he could not come. To write that he could not come because something prevented him, or he was leaving, was still worse. He sent the saddle without a reply, and, with the awareness of doing something shameful, handed over his detested farming to the steward the very next day, and left for a far-off district to visit his friend Zviashki, who had excellent snipe marshes nearby, and who had written recently asking him to fulfill his long-standing intention of visiting him. The snipe marshes in the Surov district had long tempted Levin, but he kept putting off the trip on account of farming matters. Now, though, he was glad to get away both from the Sherbatskys' neighborhood and, above all, from farming, precisely in order to hunt, which in all troubles served him as the best consolation. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.